God knows that something is necessary with the now in order to get us to where He wants us to be. Have you ever had a friend who was just completely away from God, walking away from God? They were destroying their life, and they had to hit rock bottom before they got their lives turned around and then found God and then got a relationship with Him. That's a person in whom suffering was necessary to bring him to God. Take it on a much broader scale, and God knows that the world is better if He creates this world with human free will and to go through a long process of struggle and frustration so that we get to that place in the future where everything is restored to perfection, where God makes everything perfect. So God knew that the end of perfection would be better if the middle ground of freedom was allowed. Now, God could have made us all robots, and He could say to Jesus, okay, it's time, just do it. In fact, that's what we find when we read the book of Revelation. Do you realize that the Battle of Armageddon in the book of Revelation takes about as long as it takes to blink an eye? One verse it says, Satan gathers all these people against the Holy One. The next verse it says, Jesus wins. I mean, it's basically like that. It takes about a blink of an eye. When Jesus is ready to make everything right again, it's not going to take a long time. It's not going to take a long process. So why isn't everything perfect right now? In the book of 2 Peter, it says this, God is not slow in keeping His promise, as some understand slowness, but He is patient with you, not wanting anyone to perish. If Jesus comes back right now and makes everything perfect, people you know will go to hell. If Jesus waits one more day, you have one more day to talk to them about salvation. And God is willing to wait so that the people who need to hear can hear. He waited this long because He wanted you to hear. He's willing to wait a little bit longer. Do we have any more? Okay. Why do I have to go to church? You don't. Can't I just have my own relationship with God and Jesus? You could. You wouldn't be biblical, though. And going to church is not ever in the Bible. Instead, meeting together is in the Bible. In Hebrews chapter 10, it says, let's not give up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing. So if you want to do the thing that the first century church did, by all means, you can do that. What they did is they met every single day, either in public gatherings or in people's homes. If you want to do that, by all means, go ahead and do that. In fact, if you want to say, hey, I don't want to be part of Lafayette Community Church anymore, I've got a family of my family, and I've got 6 or 7 other families, and what we're going to do is we're going to meet in each other's house every single day, and we're going to be New Testament Christians, and I'm going to ask you 2 questions. I'm going to say, okay, are you expressing all the spiritual gifts in that context? I'm going to ask you, are you submitted to leadership in that context? And if you say yes to that, then I'm going to say, are you reaching the lost in that context? If you are, then that's a church. Stop pretending it's not a church. So, see, the thing is, going to church implies that church is a location, or church is a meeting, or church is a thing. Instead, we should remember that church for Jesus is the people. So why should I be part of a church? Because if you're a believer, you already are. You're just pretending you're not. So I think every single person needs to be part of a church. Does that mean you have to show up at this building at 10:30 on Sunday morning? No, because we just might start a Saturday service. You could come to that one. Or you could be part of a life group, or you could be part of other kind of meetings. But the bottom line is that presupposes that I don't need other people. And if you think you don't need other people, you are misreading what Jesus died for. Because Jesus didn't die for a relationship with you. He died to bring you into a relationship with His family. Does that make sense? That's the teaching of Ephesians 4. So when other people ask you that question, always come back to Ephesians chapter 2 and Ephesians chapter 4. Jesus died to bring people into a family, number one. And Jesus gives leaders and gifts and each other to us so that we all attain maturity. And so we need each other, and each part needs to do its work. Any more? Okay. Is there a significant or fundamental difference between baptizing an infant and a dedication ceremony for the infant? Some churches believe that when they baptize an infant, they're dedicating the infant. But there are 2 big differences. most churches that baptize infants believe that baptizing the infant is for the infant. Most churches that dedicate infants believe that the process of dedication is for the parents. There's a difference. The churches that believe in infant baptism believe that in the symbolic action of the water, whether the baby is dunked, which is usually not the case, or most likely sprinkled, that what is happening is that they are washing away Adam's sin from that infant, the original sin. And that infant is now only responsible for his or her own sins. And most churches that believe that also believe that the infant is not responsible for their own sins until they reach some type of age of accountability, which is why confirmation or something like that usually happens around age 12, something along those lines. So infant baptism is based on a belief that this does something for the baby, that it removes the baby's sin. Dedication, on the other hand, is based on a belief that the parents are making a commitment to raise the child in a particular way. So they are dedicating the child to God, which means I'm going to raise my child in a God-honoring way. Now, my personal conviction is that the only one who can wash away sins is Jesus, and that he only washes away sins in response to repentance. And so that there's no separate kind of sin between Adam's sin and your own sin. It's all just sin. And so I don't find any biblical support for infant baptism as sin forgiving. But there are a bunch of other churches that disagree with me on that, and a bunch of other people that disagree with me on that. And so we can still disagree and still say, well, let's pay attention to what the Bible says about the people we do know. That means you and me. Have you been baptized? Are you forgiven? Have you repented? And let God deal with the infants however he wants to deal with the infants. Is that all right? Okay. Any more? Okay. Let's take just one more. Find your best one back there. Yes, it's okay to clap after an awesome worship song. Some people clap because the band did a good job. Some people clap because God is that good. But it's okay to clap. Acts is from Luke, who is not Peter's intellectual biographer and not the authority on this subject. Is this part of a bigger question? Okay. Even Paul recognizes Peter's representative as a super apostle. Oh, that's an interesting point. Okay. And is there anything else? Therefore, your either or, my both and, Peter and the statement are both foundations of different types. What if RC and EO are on the right track? Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox? Is that what RC and EO? Okay. Go back to number 2. Let me show you something real quick. Peter is called a super apostle by Paul in a derogatory term. Paul doesn't talk about Peter as a super apostle as if Paul is saying Peter really is a super apostle. He's talking about all of the main apostles who are in Jerusalem, Peter, James, and John particularly. And Paul is saying that, and he's using sarcasm to say even these super apostles, because the people saw them as super apostles, but Peter, James, and John never saw themselves as a super apostles. And so Paul doesn't acknowledge that there's any hierarchy among the apostles. Instead, there's this understanding that they've all been appointed by Jesus. So I think the bottom line is the Roman Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox Church believe that you can trace their leadership back to Peter. Historically, that's invalid. You can't trace the line all the way back to Peter because we lose track of the genealogies around 1000 AD. So we don't know, and in fact, that's why there's an Eastern Orthodox Church and there's a Roman Catholic Church, because they disagree on who the next pope was supposed to be. And so then that's why they split off from each other. So there is no historically verifiable line going all the way back to Peter. So historically, it's impossible to go all the way back to Peter, even though each one of these church traditions claim to know. But even more than that, biblically, there's no evidence that Peter was ever considered to be the leader. In fact, in Jerusalem, in Acts chapter 15, Peter is a supporter of an action that the apostles all do together, but James is the one who puts the final stamp of approval on that action. So in Acts chapter 15, James is the clear leader of the church. And then Peter is sort of one of the key guys in there. In Acts chapter 2, Peter's the leader. In Acts chapter 15, James is the leader. So, it kind of is in flux. And by the time you get to the end, then it becomes clear that Peter is sort of the number one guy when it comes to Jews, and Paul is the number one guy when it comes to the Gentiles. Cool? If there are any other questions, they came into my email inbox, and so I can respond to them this week. Check my personal blog or go to our church website, and you can find a link back to mine. But what I want to do is I want to spend just a quick time in prayer and invite the band to come back up. We're going to sing our closing song, and we're going to take our offering. Let me remind you, if today's your first day with us, let this offering just go on past. Let the basket go on past. Put your card in the offering basket or give it to the person who welcomed you at the door to get your free gift. But this offering is for our family. It's for the citizens of this local church, the people who call this church their home, who want to give generously and be part of that process together. Would you bow your heads with me?